I'll just quickly give you my impressions of the Hamas people as I have interviewed them and encountered them in Gaza and elsewhere. They are very serious people. My friend Ziad Abu Amr, who has worked closely with them for a long time, currently he's sort of in opposition to them, but he's a man of honor and has his own position on this. He recalls that when he was teaching at Birzeit University back in the 80s and early 90s, these were the serious students. These were the people who would go home and get their assignments done. They would study computer engineering, business, very concrete skills, you know, none of this airy-fairy literature and running after girls and having parties and all that stuff that secular nationalists at Birzeit often used to do. So very serious, very modern. And this comes as a surprise to people who don't know the Palestinians very well. I mean, a lot of people, and I'm sure it doesn't apply to anybody in this room, thinks that an Islamist in Palestine must be just about the same as a, you know, Taliban in Afghanistan, or if not Al-Qaeda. But these are people who are very integrated into modern society and actually have what I consider to be a very modern view of female inclusion in public life. They have 4 women MPs, and they have women in sort of second-level leadership positions throughout the movement. And they, you know, Sheikh Ahmed Yassin himself, according to one of these women MPs whom I interviewed, he would make a point when he was building a new mosque, he'd make sure there was a whole floor equal in size to the men's floor, a whole floor for the women to pray on, and that women were actively encouraged to get educated, to play a role not only in the family, but also in public activities, public works, public life. They are nationalists. They are not globalists. They're not, you know, rootless cosmopolitans like Al-Qaeda. They consider themselves to be Palestinian through and through, and to speak to a specifically Palestinian problem within the broader Islamic Ummah. They stress and practice accountability toward a Palestinian constituency. I'm just always interested when I interview Hamas people or Hezbollah people who will shake my hand. It's a, you know, small thing, okay, but I don't know, as a woman it kind of matters a little bit to me. Hezbollah people will never shake my hand. Nor will Druze sheikhs. I mean, there are all kinds of religious people who won't shake my hand as a woman. Ismail Haniyeh and Khalid Mishal, very happy to shake my hand. Hamas MPs in Ramallah, very happy to shake my hand. Hamas MPs in Hebron, no. And that's the only difference I have found in the practice of Hamas people. I mean, Hamas people are incredibly disciplined and coherent and have this coherent worldview that is obviously very different from what you find inside Fatah, which brings me to Fatah. As we know, Abu Mazen did have a real achievement in organizing his conference, the Fatah Conference, Fatah General Conference last month. 15 years overdue, but hey, who's counting? Though the conference also showed very vividly the deep disconnects and disagreements and dissonances within the organization. I mean, Fatah is so much trying to straddle this position of being both somewhat of a resistance organization and also a modern ruling political party. You know, the idea of having a party conference with, you know, professionally printed banners, and you invite the diplomats and you invite Israeli correspondents, somehow doesn't go very well with the idea that actually you're a resistance movement. And there were a lot of other ways in which the conference revealed dissonances and differences within Fatah that we know exist. The conference, I think, had an interesting effect because it put more constraint on his freedom of action than he had before, because now he feels he needs to speak to the Fatah constituency and the Fatah Central Committee and Revolutionary Council in a way that previously he had been quite able to blow them all off because nobody knew who they were. Most of them were dead. They were all scattered. You know, there was no accountability mechanism within Fatah whatsoever. Now there is, and that actually constrains his freedom of action as opposed to what it was before. But it gives him potentially something like a creaky machine through which to pursue his vision. But the problem is that Fatah has never been a unitary organization with coherent internal norms and discipline. And it still isn't. Now, it didn't matter so much that it was such a kind of, okay, the word that came to my mind was ragbag, but I'm trying to think of something that's like a little more, an exotic salad of different points of view and different networks. Very sort of incoherent in terms of its internal organization. That didn't matter so much so long as you had the historic foundational leaders sitting at the center, pulling the strings, giving the money there, taking the money away there, whispering in this person's ear here, slapping down that upcoming, up-and-rising youngster there. Arafat and Abu Jihad and Abu Yad had historic legitimacy that allowed them to retain their unquestioned leadership of the movement, even though the movement was chaotic inside. Nobody could challenge them. With the passing of that generation, Abu Mazen he is of that generation, but he is not of that political weight, either in Palestinian society or in the movement. So the fact that he doesn't have a coherent, disciplined party matters for him much more than it would have mattered to these other guys had they still been alive. Therefore, if Saeb Erekat and Abu Mazen secure the text of a final agreement with Israel, it seems clear to me that they can't rely only on Fatah to help them sell it, as many people in Fatah will be strongly opposed to it. And we need to recognize that there are many people in Fatah who are far more hardline than the people in Hamas. Fatah, let me underline this, is not the ANC, just in case anybody was hoping. Therefore, if Saeb and Abu Mazen are going to be able to sell the agreement, they will need help from many other parties, including Hamas, the Arab states, and the rest of the international community. I mean, it will take a huge effort to sell any agreement to a very skeptical and angry Palestinian public. Therefore, it has to be a decent agreement. You can't sell them a crock of whatever. They've seen it all. They've seen all the offers. They've seen all the pitfalls, all the, temporary state within provisional borders, all this, attempts to finesse the final status thing, and they have all led to disaster for the Palestinians in the shape of the continuing grabbing of their land from underneath their feet. So the selling job has to include selling the agreement in the Palestinian diaspora and to the Palestinian refugees. These are two significantly different categories, and it's worth spending a moment to understand why. Among the 3.8 million Palestinians of the occupied territories, roughly 1.7 million of them are refugees from 1948 and have outstanding claims for land and property inside Israel. In fact, these refugees in the OPTs are concentrated in Gaza, where something like 75% of the residents of Gaza are refugees, which is why Gaza has always been such an incubator of militancy, because the majority of the population there doesn't have, a settled interest in obviously not in preservation